Now, there's a saying in college football, you don't sign transfers and JUCO guys to sit the bench. So the fact that Will Howard hasn't officially been named the starting quarterback for Ohio State after they handpicked him from the transfer portal following the departure of an 11-game winner in Kyle McCord should give Ohio State fans a little bit of pause. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be competition or that he should have just been coronated after signing the letter to go to Ohio State, but you've gone through a whole spring practice, and now we're damn near ready to start fall camp, and the most important position on what is a loaded roster at Ohio State is still up for grabs. It seems like the plan hasn't exactly gone the way that Ryan Day envisioned. Now, is Howard not being named the starter because he's struggling to digest the offense under new OC Chip Kelly? Whether it's the scheme, the terminology, or both, we don't know. We're not in the room. Has he not been able to win the team or the locker room as fast as expected? Again, we don't know. Or is it the worst option, being that he just hasn't separated himself because of his ability with Devin Brown and Julian Sayin and the others? Well, for the Buckeyes' sake, I hope not. But what we do know is that there's still an ongoing competition at quarterback, which isn't ideal when the rest of the roster is so set and elite. See, the biggest problems that a quarterback competition creates in fall camp is twofold. One, you have to split up the first team reps between multiple guys, which means the true first team guys around him don't get to maximize the chemistry with one quarterback. There are only so many repetitions in a practice, and this reduces efficiency. The second problem is the rest of the first teamers and the locker room not only can't coalesce around one guy, it could actually create division over who should be the starting quarterback. This is the ultimate culture tester. Some locker rooms can handle it and others crumble. Now, it could all work out great, and it most likely will when you have all this accumulation of talent around you. But in a year where Ohio State has to turn the tide on Michigan after dropping 3 straight, and has a top 3 roster in the whole sport, the pressure has never been greater. And the longer the Buckeyes wait and go on without having a voice rise above the rest from that quarterback room, the riskier this season becomes. Guy who knows a little bit about a quarterback room, former Michigan quarterback David Cohn to my left, my brother, former Western State, Colorado wide receiver Blaine Crain to my right. David, Ohio State's going to be fine. I'm not worried about Ohio State winning 90% of their games. But to me, when we've gotten to this point, where we are about to kick off fall camp here in a couple weeks, everybody is, even less than that. How worried are you that Will Howard hasn't already taken this job by the reins and they're sprinting toward the season with a lot of momentum in him as the starter?
I'm not worried in the slightest. Will Howard didn't transfer into Columbus to sit the bench. He will be the starting quarterback. But the fact that he hasn't been named the starter already, I don't see the reasoning for that being that they have quarterbacks like Will Howard and the others underperforming. I think they have a room full of guys that are overperforming. Now, I don't say that with any personal experience having attended summer camp. They won't even let me in the city of Columbus. They barely let me in the state of Ohio, and that's fine. I say that with over 16 years now of up close and personal experience of what the Buckeyes bring to the table at the quarterback position. Okay, it's not just like the C.J. Strouds of the world. We're talking about, J.T. Barrett, Braxton Miller, Terrell Pryor, Troy Smith won a Heisman Trophy there. Joe Burrow, who we were talking about, had to transfer out of there. Okay, they keep a great one at quarterback. And I even wanted to pull up this stat here. Last year, it seemed like they had the most struggles they've had in a long time at the quarterback position, right? And Kyle McCord, he's basically like getting run out of there after the season. That kid still went 11-1, threw for 3,100 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions with a 66% completion percentage. Unbelievable. I would have killed for those sorts of numbers. And that's supposedly the worst quarterback that they've had. So, look, I think that at this point, you have a coach in Ryan Day who's saying, man, we're loaded at the quarterback position. Devin Brown was a 5-star recruit. You just got the number 1 quarterback to flip from Alabama when Nick Saban retired. Not naming a starting quarterback right now is keeping a room full of alpha males hungry, trying to fight for that position. And Will Howard, I think he's going to come in and be the starting quarterback. He's going to come in and probably even be more than that. When you play quarterback at that school, you're most likely going to be a captain of the team. But hey, make him earn it, make him work for it. And yes, they're going to win 95% of their games. They're going to put up 50 points a game. It's all about those couple at the end of the season. It's not just Michigan. Whatever SEC school you're going to face off against in the playoff, when you have to go on the road to Oregon, when you maybe have to play a rematch game against Oregon or possibly Michigan in the Big Ten championship game with no divisions this year, that's where you want a seasoned quarterback who's going to take over.
So let me ask this. If you think Will Howard's going to be the starter, right? Do you think deep down Ryan Day already knows he's probably the starting quarterback?
Yes.
Then why would you waste this time? And David, you've seen the way the reps are dispersed. If Will Howard's going to be the guy, regardless of how many alphas are in the room, name his ass the guy, so when you go through a spring, which you can win it in the spring. We've seen a ton of quarterbacks come in, transfer in, go through a spring practice. I watched Peyton Thorne come in and win the locker room and be the guy. Now, they're in a little different situation, obviously, at Auburn than they are in Ohio State. But why are we going to keep playing this game of, we're not going to name him, we're not going to name him, then in 2 weeks into fall camp, which means 2 weeks before the season start off, now you've lost 50% of those reps he could be getting with Egbuka. He could be getting with Jeremiah Smith. He could be getting with these guys. We don't know he's losing those
reps, though. We don't. The reps may be already dispersed.
And they might. They might.
Like I said, I'm not there.
If it's a true competition, you know what I'm saying.
I do know what you're saying.
And Devin Brown, I mean, I
just think so many things have changed now in an era where a kid can transfer at any drop of a hat. By keeping this quarterback competition officially still open, you're keeping guys from being able to transfer out. And look, maybe they're having a true open competition. I mean, this is what I'm saying. Like, Devin Brown, this is where it really hurts him. They got hurt in that bowl game.
For sure.
Because when Kyle McCord transferred out, that was his opportunity to show out.
Yep.
Against high-quality competition, gets hurt on, what was it, the first drive, the second drive,
like
something like that.
Play,
that was such a prime opportunity before Will Howard ever transferred in for him to be able to say, you know what, this job is going to be mine. All of these dudes can play football. So maybe it is a legitimate open competition, and he's just saying, look, we're going to fight this thing out into fall camp. This is our year to win it all. The rest of this roster is national championship worthy. We need the type of quarterback who can come in late in games, on the road, in November, in December, in early January, to put that thing away when Carson Beck and the Georgia Bulldogs are doing their thing, or when Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian are dialing up a bunch of nastiness. We need a quarterback who can beat those teams.
I totally see what you're saying. Blaine, this offense is going to look different than any Ohio State offense that we've seen recently, bringing in Chip Kelly as the OC. I don't think you go get a player like Will Howard, who's a good passer, not a great passer, but he's a big guy that can run. That RPO game that we know Chip Kelly's going to bring in. I don't think it's going to be some crazy up-tempo, fast-paced offense. I don't think they're going to go that far. But you brought in the type of quarterback that Will Howard is for a reason. Do you think this transformation Ohio State's going to have on offense, how much more dangerous does that make them? Because I think it does make them more dangerous. Kyle McCord can only... Don't forget, there were some games where Ohio State scored like 24, 24, 20. You go back and look at the Notre Dame game. I think they scored the least points 14. They have, in like the last 5 years last year, and they were still able to win 11 games. But how dangerous do you think this offense is going to be, regardless of whether it's Will Howard or Devin Brown, with the way they can both run?
Oh, with the talent they have on this roster, especially on the offensive side of the ball, it's going to be dangerous no matter who you put at quarterback. Right now, in my opinion, they have the best tandem of running backs in college football.
Yeah, hands down.
Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Quinshon Judkins is going to be a problem. You have Egbuka. You have nothing but talent at the receiver position. And you go back and you kind of look at Ohio State last year in the games that they lost. Let's look at they ran on a lot of teams, and they ran well against smaller teams. But in the big games is where the running game hurt. The Penn State, you had 60 yards. Michigan, you had 60 yards. Wisconsin, you didn't have a lot of yards. The big games, it was a quarterback and the offensive line.
Yeah.
That let them down.
But that's why my point is, when the quarterback can run and you have this new system where it can hit at different points. Last year with Kyle McCord, you knew he wasn't going to pull the ball down and take off, right? There were certain ways. It was already hard enough trying to defend Ohio State when they weren't a one-trick pony, but you knew who Kyle McCord is. With Will Howard or Devin Brown, however it works out, I do think it's going to alleviate a little bit of that run game. Now, the left side of their offensive line, remember, they got that tackle, the San Diego State transfer last year, who second year, I think he's going to be even better. The right side of the line is a little bit, we don't know for sure what's going to happen right now. Can Seth McLaughlin, the center from Alabama, be able to control the snaps? I think he will. But I feel like, Blaine, this offense under this new regime and this new scheme, while it may be different, I think it was brought in to alleviate a little bit of those run problems, because you can hit in different areas. Right now, all of a sudden, that backside defensive end, you can't just go chasing the back because the quarterback may pull it. Not only that, that nickel or that down safety can't just come screaming downhill when he gets that run read because Will Howard could keep it and pop it, or he could keep it and spit it out to somebody running a slant or some sort of variation on the outside.
Well, yeah, when it comes to Chip Kelly, what are you going to see? A lot of pre-snap. You're going to see a lot of eye candy, a lot of motion, a lot of movement. And the thing about what Chip Kelly does, you go back to Oregon days, he's going to utilize his players in the best way. And I don't think Will Howard has to be a world beater for them to win a national championship.
Well, can he make the throw? This is what it's going to come down to. You're going to be able to line up and roll over a lot of people because Ohio State's just physics is physics. Ohio State is going to be better than most of the teams they play. But in those games where Will Howard has to make those 3 to 5 throws in tight coverage, whether it's in the regular season at the end or in the middle, maybe against Oregon and Dan Lanning them on the road, and then in the playoff, if you run into a Georgia, if you run into somebody that you can't just go up there and maul, can Will Howard make those 3 to 5 throws in tight coverage that he has to make for them to win that game? You can't just roll your helmet out there and beat Georgia and some of these teams.
And that's something that none of us can say until we've seen it, right? Like we don't know. And if they lose because of that, hey, what can you do? You brought back the best roster you could put together. You brought in a transfer quarterback. You let them all fight it out. That's why you lose. If they lose, if the Buckeyes lose because they have more run problems with 2 of the top 5 running backs in the country, in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, and a quarterback who can run, and Chip Kelly calling plays, then to me, there's only one place to point, and that's Ryan Day. You do have a lack of toughness problem on the offensive line if you can't run the ball at will 100%. With the skill position players that they have. And if that ends up being the problem throughout this year or in the biggest games this year, I don't know how Ryan Day continues as the head coach, because this is a program that is known for running the ball down your throat. I mean, forget about Archie Griffin and Maurice Clarett and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, down ballot on their roster, they've had guys who can run the ball at will.
Here's what I'll tell you about the Ohio State defense. Caleb Downs may be the best defensive player in the country, like in aggregate, like at any position. I think is that talented. They should have a top 3 defense in the country. So if the offense for some reason does sputter in some of these big games, which it happens sometimes, the defense with what they return is an absolute nightmare. And you got Jim Knowles as the DC. I think they have the number 1 ranked OC in the Big Ten in Chip Kelly and the number 1 ranked DC. Say what you will about that in Jim Knowles. This is it for Ohio State. This is it. To me, you either beat Michigan, right, and then make a run in the playoff, or if you lose to Michigan, the only way Ryan Day's there, which it would be unacceptable in my opinion for them to lose to Michigan, but it is a rivalry game, you better win a national championship. Like that's the only way that you can overcome it. But David, this defense is loaded, absolutely loaded. Let's go ahead through Ohio State's schedule, Blaine, really quick, and because we want to hit the superlatives. We know Oregon, we know Michigan. That non-conference, I mean, it's going to be.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I was talking about this with David earlier. It's funny Ohio State got after Michigan last year for their non-conference games, and their first 3 games are their non-conference games. That is Akron at home, Western Michigan at home, and Marshall.
And then Michigan State, might as well throw them.
Yeah.
You won't hear a word about it, though.
No.
Hear a word about
that Michigan State game is on the road. You have Iowa at home. You go to Oregon, Nebraska at home, at Penn State, Purdue at home, Northwestern on the road, Indiana, and you finish up with them boys in blue.
At Penn State.
I wonder if Penn State can make things interesting.
Their offense.
Well, can Drew Aller make
There's offense.
They've got to be able to throw the ball.
If it's me, and this might be a crazy take, I know the Penn State game's on the road, but I think the Nebraska-Ohio State game will be closer than the Penn State-Ohio State game.
You want to make a bet on that right now?
I do.
And Nebraska goes to Ohio State?
Correct.
Look, Matt Rule is the ultimate builder. He's Bob the Builder, but their ass ain't built up yet. Ohio State's going to steamroll them.
I trust Drew Aller about as far as I can throw the facts.
Well, it's like we said last year. What was the difference between Penn State and Iowa, really? Really, I know Iowa's quarterback was unbelievably.
Penn State
could not throw the ball.
But it was only against the best teams, right? Like they were still scoring.
You watch
Iowa. Look at Iowa. That's what they do.
No, Iowa
threw up for 4 quarters watching them play
every drive.
Yeah, I watched them throw up for 4 quarters playing Rutgers.
Iowa was just bad against everybody. Iowa was just bad against. And you look at Drew Aller's numbers, and you're like, man, he threw 22 touchdowns and had 3 interceptions. Well, because they really only threw it against teams that were way better than. If you go back and look at the games where they did play somebody that could match them talent-wise and physicality-wise, I mean, you know, they were worse. They had worse chemistry from quarterback to wide receiver than
All right, so
when I
Penn
took
State,
chemistry in high
They put
school.
up 38 against West Virginia, 63 against Delaware, 30 against Illinois, 31 against. That's where they beat Iowa 31-0.
But when they're like 2 pick sixes in that game, it was like there was like some
Possibly.
craziness.
41 against Northwestern, 63 against UMass, 12 against the Buckeyes, 33 against Indiana, 51 against Maryland. That's a Mike Loxley team. 15 against Michigan, 27 against Rutgers, 42 against Michigan State. Then they put up 25.
Look, you only scored 25 points against Ole Miss last year. I don't want to hear anything.
Well, and again, you against what? Michigan, they scored what? 15?
Yeah.
And that game was like getting in a time.
No one threw it.
Then you said they scored 12 against who?
The Buckeyes.
The Buckeyes, and against Iowa, I think they got a couple pick sixes unless I'm losing.
Iowa
couldn't score with a
Drew Aller
fat
holds
chip.
back Penn State like Joe Milton holds back Tennessee.
Well, I
Drew Aller was young, though.
I've got to see. Drew Aller still has time. Joe Milton was like 35 years old. It's like with DJU. I know who you are because I've watched you for what seems like 8 years. I think Drew Aller still has time, but we got to see it this year. Like it better blossom. And now there's no division.
And he didn't have a lot of help at the skill positions either.
No. What's up, YouTube? Hey, do us a favor. Trying to get to that 150,000 sub mark before football season, and only you can do it. So please subscribe, hit the like button, turn the notification bell on, and just live your life the way you want to.